Hi, welcome back to the Shane Plays Out of the Abyss Notes series as I take my group and my friendly local game store through the Out of the Abyss adventure from D&D, 5th edition D&D, which is the big mega adventure in the Underdark that also involves the Demon Lords. So this week, the adventure in Gracklstugh continued. I think this is their third session in Gracklstugh, if I remember correctly. The character or the player that lost their character by, at second level, charging an adult red dragon, Thumberchod, was replaced. He contacted many times over the weekend and earlier in the week with questions about his character, including could he use a winged elf, I think Avariel is the name, that is so rare to be almost mythical, and there's not actually any stats for. Now, I think there's some stats in the Dungeon Masters Guild, which are basically homebrew stats that have been published, but there's not actually any official stats. So after a lot of wrangling over Star Elves and those and this and that, I finally said, look, if it's in the SCAG, or it's in the Player's Handbook, or even if it's an officially published 5e or 5e or whatever product like Princes of the Apocalypse, Out of the Abyss, whatever, Horde of the Dragon Queen, and there's official stats we can refer to, then yes, you can use one of those races. But if it's just some, like in the SCAG, it's just casually mentioned, oh, these races of elves are so rare to be almost mythical, and there's no actual stats for 5e, I said I'd rather not. One, because it's, to me, the idea of a mythical, angelic 5th edition, or not 5th edition, but elf with wings in the Underdark seems weird to me. Not that it couldn't happen, but the main reason that I have an issue with it is because the other stuff I could work through narratively, that's fine. But the main issue is if I allow that, I may have another player want to do something that really causes a problem. And if I'm like, well, I'd rather not, so will you let so-and-so have the winged thing without stats and we house ruled it? So I'm just trying to set a consistent precedent, unless it's specifically in the official stats for D&D as a race, I'm probably not going to let it go in this campaign. I may change my mind, but that's what I'm doing right now. So if anyone's curious on how I handle that kind of stuff, that's what I did. And this guy, I mean, he was texting me and calling me, and he's like, well, there's a novel out there somewhere. And this was at first, he said, well, I have an elf who's been raised by humans, so can I trade the need to, or the trance instead of sleeping, and the immunity to being magically put to sleep for a feat because they're raised by humans? And I said, well, no, because that's an innate racial thing, not a learned thing. And he's like, well, there's a novel, I can't remember the name of it, and da-da-da, and it had an elf who learned to sleep, and I was like, yeah, that's cool and everything, but, that's how I'm going to rule on this. So this poor guy, he really had some ideas he wanted to do with his replacement character. Now, the one thing I did say, I was like, you can do whatever class you want, you can do whatever, if you're a cleric, whatever school or realm, or I forget what it's called off the top of my head, of the cleric, all this, the sphere. But I said, one thing I don't want you to do is, because the previous character that charged the dragon and got killed very quickly in one round was by the dice, I let the dice do it, was a paladin. So I said, I'd rather you not make another paladin, because if you lose a character, especially through, in my opinion, something that completely could have been avoided, and then you just come in with basically the same character again, there's no real risk to dying. I want there to be a little bit of a loss, a sense of, oh, that character's gone, and I can't just roll up another paladin. I've got to play a different character class, even though I wanted to play a paladin. I do feel, and I know the current school of thought on gaming is, everybody has a good time no matter what, and but I feel that in order to get a sense of reward, that there also should be a sense of challenge and the risk of loss. So So that was my thought on there. I'd welcome your comments on the video if you have a different approach to it. And I did make sure to give the player plenty of time. I didn't just like shut them down with a brick wall. I had many text and phone calls and discussions with them, and even talked with them again last night. So I think they're happy. I'm not trying to be like, no, I'm trying to set boundaries, but at the same time, discuss and try to be open to possibilities. So, and along those lines, I got sent, if anybody watching this sent this to me, I thank you. I don't know who did it. The Dungeon Masters Guild, just out of the blue from the website, sent me like a $3 or $4 PDF of character options for 5th edition. And it has all kinds of classes and races and cool stuff in it. And it actually had that Avarial winged elf race. So I thought that my player had sent it to me. I said, did you send that to me? He said, no, I didn't send it. I didn't even know about that. It sounds really cool. So if somebody watching this sent that to me, I appreciate it. Let me know who you are, and I will definitely give you a thanks. And there is some very cool stuff in there. I'm very impressed with the artwork. Let me see if I can find it real quick, and I'll tell you what the official name of it is. It's actually quite nice. I was really impressed with, not only the content, but the artwork was really good too. So, and it was a DM's Guild product. So let me see if I can find it here really quickly. La la la, clicky clicky. Well, I don't see it here. I know I downloaded it. I guess I didn't put it in my D&D folder. Let me see if it's on my... Yeah, here it goes. It's Very Swiftbottom's Guide to Advanced Player Options. So check that out in the DM's Guild. It's pretty cool. Okay, on with what happened last night. Basically, they had spent the night, got a long rest. They discussed the fact that the drow seemed to be paying attention to them. There was some discussion of, is it drow versus drow? And then I guess originally it was supposed to be drow because in the Norse, there's some sort of troll that the way you pronounce it has been mangled into drow, which became the drow. I don't know. It was an interesting discussion. But people were like, is it drow or drow? I think I've always said drow, but some people say drow, and evidently that's technically correct based on the etymology. So they had discussion of that. They didn't see any more drow in the common room watching them, but they did discuss, what should we do, and it led to some actions they took. Now, this all relates to the pursuit level. In Gracklstugh, there's a group of drow that have been sent by Ilvara to Gracklstugh to keep an eye out for the characters and has seen them. So they're kind of keeping an eye to report back to Ilvara. The pursuit level, if it gets up to 6, they'll have an encounter with Ilvara and her scouting party that's trying to find them because she's trying to save face after they escaped. So that will happen. I left since another full day didn't pass in yesterday's adventure. I didn't bump the pursuit level. I left it at 4. That's what it was from the time before. But they did talk about, what are we going to do about these drow that are watching us, and kind of reiterated that they most likely those drow want to attract the least amount of attention to themselves as possible at this time. But it was interesting when the group went out to try to find Droki, because they're trying to find the Thieves Guild because they're under orders from the Keepers of the Flame. They left some NPCs behind, which I was actually going to have an NPC suggest that, but they suggested it themselves, what made me happy because it makes the party easier to manage, and it makes sense story-wise to have people stay back at the inn and keep an eye on things. So they left, after a lot of discussion, they left Sereth, the drow, they left Shushar, the pacifist Kuatoa, and they left Stool, because it was kind of determined. Stool's just he doesn't even have arms. About all he can do is like kind of bump into people, and he facilitates communication with his spores. And there was some discussion of can we trust the drow, Sereth? And I said for the time being, Sereth seems to be kind of on board. He's not friendly, but he seems to be on board with the group because it serves his interest. Now Eldith, I had Eldith, the female dwarf. She's like, I'm not staying behind. I'm going with you. And that not only that fit her character, but a couple of the players in the group wanted her to come too, because I think they only have one melee fighter right now in the monk, because four of my players left there on vacation for like 2 months, and story-wise they are arrested. So anyway, and so they went out to look for Droki. And one thing that was interesting, of course, they leveled up. I think I mentioned last time I milestoned them to level 3. This is the last milestone level they get, and from here on out it's pure XP. But I wanted to get them to level 3, because this can be a challenging adventure. And this was like session 9. They put a lot of time and role playing and stuff into this, and been showing up and having fun. So I wanted to reward them for that as well. Because this adventure can be stingy in many ways, XP-wise, including equipment, money-wise, spell-wise, all that spell components, very stingy, to create that sense of, oh, we're in trouble in the Underdark. So they went to look for Droki. They went to the Blade Bazaar. They didn't find him. I rolled. There's a 20% chance in even time of finding Droki in the Blade Bazaar. They didn't find him. So they were like, well, what do we do? Do we want to go see the Giants because the Giants invited us to their place? Or do we want to go to the Western Cleft where the Darrow live? Because the Darrow live on either side of the furrow, the big kind of chasm in the middle of the city. They live on the eastern and western edges in slums, basically, squalor. So there was some discussion, and they finally decided to go west and look for Droki, because they'd been told that the Western Cleft district seems to be where the contact happens between Droki and the Thieves Guild, but we don't know exactly how. So they decided not to go into the Giants because they would have to go back deep into the main city of Gracklstugh to get there. And even though they've got their dragon pins and the little holy symbol that the Keepers of the Flame gave them, that's not a totally free pass. It just makes things a little easier. So they decided to do that. Now, one thing I ran into with this adventure last night, and I had kind of thought about it before, and I was going to look again at lunch yesterday before I ran the game last night. I didn't get a chance. Yesterday was crazy at work. I don't really... There's this thing called Ladagur's Furrow, and it goes in the middle of the city. It splits the city in half. And at either end of that, or where the Darrow live, behind gates, and all along the main part of it is where the main population of Gracklstugh lives. Now, the map and the description of Gracklstugh in the book show a lot of bridges. I know you can't really see that, but there's the furrow there that we're talking about, and there's all kinds of bridges. There's a ton of bridges going across it, but I didn't really see how do you get down into it. So maybe I missed something. I tried to reread it a couple of times, so I just fudged it and just said, you can kind of go down in there through there's a couple of guards. You can kind of go down in there, and I let there be a charisma check to try to get past them. And I gave them charisma with advantage because they had the stuff, the pins and the holy symbol. And the bard tried to silver tongue past the guards and failed. So it's like, nope, I'm not letting you in. And then the elf, the new elf character, who's a wizard. Last week they were going to be a cleric, but they decided to be a wizard. Tried it with a nice dexterity or nice charisma, and actually I think rolled a natural 20. So what I had happen was as she was explaining, we need to get down there. We're on from the Keepers of the Flame. We have business. I rolled because it was a natural 20. I rolled off in the distance. They actually saw Thimberchod flying over the city, spouting flame and relighting the smelters. And the guards were like visibly reminded of Thimberchod and the Keepers of the Flame's power, and were like, yes, please, I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding. Please come down. So I think it explains that there's guards at the gates at either end of the furrow. There's a certain amount of guards, and there's also invisible guards, which they didn't run into the invisible guards because they didn't try to have a big fight or anything like that. But I just kind of fudged that for both getting into the furrow and getting into the west. I didn't really see how do you get down into the furrow. How do you get down in there? So I missed something. If somebody wants to leave a comment in the notes or in the video comments or whatever, I'd appreciate it. But I just fudged it, which sometimes you have to do. I'm sure I missed something obvious. But anyway, so they got into the Western Cleft District. I explained that, there's Darrow everywhere, and there's kind of descriptive text that it's like squalor, it's like slums, it's very disorganized. There's Darrow everywhere. They're obviously insane, acting crazy, and the ones that do pay attention to you are hostile, like giving you nasty glances and things like that. So, they kind of went for a while, and the way things work in the Western Cleft rules and the Eastern Cleft, either one, is for every hour you're in there, you have a 25% chance of being attacked by up to 2d4 Darrow. And you can also search for Droki and or the entrance into the Whirlstone tunnels, caverns, which is where Droki's heading for. So, I kind of talked to them, what do you want to do? And the rules state that they can try to stealth and remain very, low key. They didn't want to do that. I asked them a couple times without trying to spoon feed them. I said, how are you behaving? Da, da, da. And they just assumed that, we can't do a stealth through here. And even though I kind of tried to hint around if they could. But anyway, so they didn't stealth. That's fine. Like I said, I don't want to twist their arms, but I was trying to let them know that, you could probably try that if you want, because it's so disorganized in there. And the rules say that, you can actually stealth through this area. But anyway, so two things after they were in there for a while, and my thief Daggers, the blind thief, who's an arcane trickster, has the ability to throw some cantrips. So he threw understand languages because he was trying to hear what was going on with all this discussion, and I kind of ad-libbed that because the Darrows speak Undercommon and they speak Dwarvish. So I kind of ad-libbed that they were speaking almost a Creole, like if you're in Louisiana and it's a mix of English and French. In this area, they're speaking almost like a Creole of Dwarvish and Undercommon kind of mixed together. I just thought that was a nice touch. And the players kind of seemed to twinge on that, like, oh, that was a neat little, detail. Kind of gave some more atmosphere. But anyway, so after looking around and whatever, the way the rules go is for every hour, you could do an investigation check to try to find Droki or the tunnel, and then there's also the chance of getting attacked by Darrow. So last night I started using the group checks, which where you have everybody roll, and if at least half or more of the group get it, then it succeeds. So the first group check to find Droki failed. The second one passed. So they've been in there for 2 hours. The second one passed. But at the exact same time, because they've been in there an hour, I rolled their chances to get attacked by Darrow, and it was like a 19, and the chance is 25 or below. So they got attacked by the dice. I rolled 2d4 and it's 7. So they got attacked by 7 Darrow. At the exact same time they saw Droki. And he's like, oh, I'm late. And, that little spiel they give him. And they immediately like, Alice in Wonderland. And which this book is inspired. This adventure has some Alice in Wonderland inspiration to it. And, a couple of characters are like, oh, that's the White Rabbit in Alice in Wonderland. And then a couple of the other players like, yeah, this adventure is actually based on that. So that was a neat little moment. Anyway, they defeated the Darrow pretty handily, even though the monk, the Darrow have these little hook spheres that they can either hit you with and hurt you or trip you. And the agile cat monk, who's a tiefling, a cat-like tiefling, got tripped, which was very embarrassing for the monk. They defeated the Darrow fairly easily, and they were also intrigued by their repeating crossbows, so they grabbed a couple of their repeating crossbows. Now, rules-wise, one thing that had to happen was the Tiefling Monk wanted to use key points to do like a sunburst or something like that, and to blast it in the air to try to intimidate the Darrow into running off. So that's kind of like turning undead, and that's a little OP. I don't just throw a spell and use it like it's a fear spell or turning undead. So I did actually let him try it. I said, what's your spell difficulty? And he told me, and then I had the Darrow roll as one as a saving throw against his spell difficulty, and they failed. So what I ruled is, for one turn, they were at disadvantage for all of their rolls, because they were kind of like, but I mean, they're not going to be scattered. I don't think that's in the rules anywhere. This is kind of how I did it quickly on the spot. And I explained that, you can't just turn Darrow. It's a neat idea, but so I'm going to kind of meet you halfway. And he seemed okay with that. Anyway, they dispatched the Darrow fairly quickly, and then two of the players were like, "Where did Droki go?" It's like, well, it's been too long to be right behind him, but give me a roll. A couple of them rolled while the others were looting the bodies, and one of them rolled well enough. I was like, you know exactly where he went. You don't see him now, but you have a very good memory of exactly where he went. So because of that, even though another hour hadn't passed, I let them do another group check to see if they could find the cavern entrance. And through the check, they did. I think I gave it a DC 15, like the book explains, and they found it. So this is the Whirlstone Caverns, which, there's a couple of different factions in there. It's probably be in there for a couple of sessions. It's kind of a big part of Gracklstugh. So they, and I kind of explained there's like little wisps of Fair's Rest's glowing fog coming out, and that kind of helped you find it and all this stuff. Anyway, they squeezed in. I gave them the description of just getting into the caverns, and they're in Area 1, and that's where we ended last night. So it was about on target for exactly where I wanted to end them. We were even able at the beginning of the session to have a little chat and whatnot, and didn't feel rushed, even though I was a little bit late from work. But we ended about where I wanted us to end. We went about 15 minutes over. I try to wrap us at 2 hours since we played at night at a game store, and there's anywhere from age 13 up to 50 something. So it was a good session last night. A lot of fun. I think we ended right exactly where I wanted us to end. And so there's that, and that's how it went. So next, probably 2, maybe even 3 sessions, they'll be in the Whirlstone tunnels doing all of that stuff. So, and a couple of the characters are like, I really want that dragon egg, which is, one of the things the Keepers of the Flame have lost to the Thieving Guild. So another neat thing, this is kind of a side, I'll probably do another full video about this, but I got these campaign coins from, in fact, the company is Campaign Coins. I did I supported a Kickstarter of theirs. So I don't think it's going to autofocus in, but I got these cool little, like props, right? They're like all kinds of different colors. There's copper, there's platinum, there's gold, there's electrum, I think, in different denominations, and different designs. So these are really cool. So go check out Campaign Coins. That's the name of the company. They sell them directly. They also have Kickstarters and stuff like that, and they just have a lot of different styles. And like I said, it's a great prop. To go when you pay somebody, you say, "Hey, player, hold out your hand," and you actually, drop it. That's just a great prop. So kudos to Campaign Coins. They're very cool. I'll probably buy some more. Just wanted to give a shout out to them. Anyway, thanks for watching the Shane Plays Out of the Abyss Notes series, and I will be back next week for the next episode. I really appreciate you watching. I look forward to your comments in the video. Make sure to leave a thumbs up on YouTube. That helps me a lot. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Happy adventuring.